Hi guys, so first of all, ignore my ugly face because I left my makeup at school, so you're just going to have to deal with my pimply face. I've even got this like massive one on my nose and this one that I'm low-key hiding with my hair. I'm not having a good time.
Today I'm going to be talking about my 5 biggest classic novels that are on my TBR list. These are all books that I might even never get to, but I have a really strong interest in wanting to read. But they're just so fat that it might never even happen, so take it with a grain of salt. If I never read these books, I'm sorry, it's just because they're too fat. But I am like really interested in them. I know at least a couple of them I will definitely read, but I'm just a bit intimidated by them. Okay, so the first book that I really want to read is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I went on a bit of a high of like Russian literature a few weeks ago, like a couple months ago, and I brought a lot of like Russian classics, a lot. And that was after I'd sort of seen War and Peace, the movie, the TV series, sorry, not the movie, and I'd read a couple of Tolstoy's short stories, and I was just like, classic novels, Russia, and this was one of the ones that I was most interested in, so I brought it, and it's the one that sort of stayed on my mind when I've been thinking about which books I want to read. A couple of Russian books that I was really interested in have sort of just slipped and gone into non-existence. But this one is, to me this one is really intriguing just because it's about the mind of a murderer basically, and it's this real big psychological study, and it just seems so interesting. I'm dropping things. It just seems so interesting, and the way it's referenced everywhere must mean it's freaking good, because I can't watch any sort of movie. I was watching freaking Gilmore Girls the other day and this came up. It's everywhere, so I want to read it one day, but it's Russian, so it's gonna be difficult. The next book I want to read is another Russian classic, but to me it's probably higher up on the list of to be read than Crime and Punishment, just because I've done a lot of research into it and I've watched the TV series and everything, and so I really sort of understand the story a lot more, and I really want to get into the novel to understand it that one extra layer. That novel is a very small novel, War and Peace. This is probably the fattest book in Russian literature. It's so fat it's broken into 3 books. Literally, I left my own edition at school, so this is my dad's edition, but it's broken up into 3 books because it's just so fat, and they're all 400 pages with Bible pages. So yeah, I want to read this. I'm not going to put any pressure on myself to get through it though, because just the sheer size, even holding this up is giving me an arm workout, yeah. But it is really high on the things, on the novels that I want to read, especially in the Russian sort of section of books I want to read, so it is something I'm really interested in, and I might actually read Crime and Punishment to get used to the sort of language. I don't know if it's going to be similar to Tolstoy, but I have a feeling it will, it'll be in the same vein if it's not similar. But another reason I'm really fascinated by Tolstoy is because I've read How Much Land Does a Man Need, and there's another one in the back of here, What Men Live By. And these were really intriguing. I found What Men Live By was a lot more intriguing than How Much Land Does a Man Need. What Men Live By is basically about an angel, and he comes down to earth, and it's really intriguing. So I found all of his ideas that he got across, they were just mind blowing. And then I've also read Death of Ivan Ivanich, which is basically about this guy who's lying in a bed, dying, and everyone around him is just oh, okay, he's dying. But there's this real internal struggle going on in his head, and he basically has this entire character arc, but nobody can see it because he's lying on a bed dying, and he can't communicate it to anybody, if that makes sense. And it's basically about accepting that he's gonna die. Yeah, so that's one that, like, that's sort of why I'm interested in Tolstoy, because I've read sort of 3 short stories by him that are really, really intriguing and thought-provoking, so he is high on my list. Higher than Fyodor Dostoevsky, I can't pronounce his name. So then, moving on to England now, some English literature. This is another book I brought on my sort of bender of buying classic novels. Like, when I brought all my Russian novels, I also brought a couple of classic novels as well, and this is one of them. And it's sort of stayed on the top of my list, because it sort of stayed, I've sort of kept hearing things about it. Like, once I've sort of learnt about it, I've sort of gone, that's a book I want to read. I've sort of heard everywhere different opinions on it. It's made me more and more interested in it, and that novel is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm probably pronouncing nobody's name right, but we're just gonna go with it. Moby Dick is like the holy grail of classic novels. Everyone who has read like a decent amount of classics has read Moby Dick. It's actually Baz Peirce's favourite novel, I believe, so that's a thing. Like, Baz Peirce likes it, so it must be good. And I'm really also interested in it because it's got a very experimental style. It's a very famous story, so if you haven't heard of it, you should start looking around, because you'll see it everywhere. It is very, very significant. This book was actually based off a true story, and they actually made a movie of that story, and it's called The Heart of the Sea, and it's starring Liam Hemsworth, so if you want to check that out just to get a... Okay, and then another book from England, I believe, I hope it's from England, I'm pretty sure it's from England, is Vanity Fair by William Thackeray. I have watched the BBC series of this, and it is crack up. Like, the main character is just so sassy and just so out there, and she's just, oh my gosh, she's hilarious. Like, I don't even know how to put it into words. Like, she just literally breaks all expectations of what a good woman should be, a good governess should be. And she's basically just this social climber, and the whole book is just her social climbing until it falls flat in her face, and it is hilarious. I want to read this because I love stories that are just social climbing bitches. Like, and that's really what this book is. It's just this hilarious story about this woman who's just social climbing to the point where she is destructive. And like, one of my favourite movies is actually Gone with the Wind, which is amazing, just so you know. It's actually the highest grossing film of all time, also one of the longest films made. It was the longest film ever made when it was released. Yeah, sassy films about women who want money, make a lot of money, so that's Vanity Fair. I don't really go into the plot, but you don't really need to know the plot. You just need to know it's like the social climbing arsehole. That's what's so great about it. So number 5, the final book that I want to read, probably the one I am most interested in, and I've done the most research for. I even wrote a whole essay on it. Like, this is my freaking essay, and it's freaking long, okay? Like, I wrote a freaking essay on this book, and I haven't even read it, so yeah. Well, I wrote it on the movie, the Disney movie actually, and this movie I didn't even really like. I sort of had glossed over it when I was little, and I was sort of like, I didn't like it when I was little, so I never went back to it. And then I saw this video by Lindsay Elias on the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is the movie I'm talking about, and she just fascinated me. I was like, whoa, this is like real deep. This is way deeper than I remember it. And so I watched the novel, and like, it's real dark. I watched the novel, I watched the movie, but it's like real dark for a Disney film. Like, literally, there's a priest, and the entire conflict of the film comes when the priest gets horny for this lady and decides that that lady's either gonna date him or she's gonna burn at the stake. So basically, it's got this really, really interesting history, and Victor Hugo wrote it at a time where he was trying to explain historical preservation to a society where the idea of historical preservation didn't exist. And he was seeing all of these big buildings like Notre Dame, all this great Gothic architecture being torn down, and he was just so shocked by it, and he was just like, everyone is idiots. He wrote this essay called War on the Demolishers, which is basically literally going, everyone's idiots, just stop. And it's just really fascinating. So I'll link down Lindsay Ellis's video and the essay that Victor Hugo wrote, War on the Demolishers, down below, because they are really interesting, and they are what actually piqued my novel, like my interest in this novel. And I'm really interested as well in the way that this book went from being a story that was a catalyst for historical preservation, like the message of historical preservation, to a Disney film. How do you get to that point where you go, I think it will be a great idea to adapt this novel where literally every single character dies except for the goat? Go and watch the scene Hellfire, because that song is just like... Go and watch Lindsay Ellis's video on it, because I sort of wrote my essay from an English perspective, but she's written hers from a media studies perspective, and hers is a lot more interesting than mine and a lot more researched. So go watch that video if you're interested. It is 38 minutes long, but it's worth it. Trust me, it is worth it. It's so fascinating. Like, just watch the first 10 minutes and you'll be like, what? If you are interested by her video, I would actually recommend not watching the Disney film, instead watching the musical. There's plenty of bootlegged versions on YouTube, and it's so much better because it's not trying to cater for this childish audience. It's so much more intriguing, and that's why I want to read the novel as well, just because I want to go from the Disney film to the musical to the novel. Like, we're getting down layers and just getting a bit more in depth here. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah, I feel like none of this video has made sense, but I hope that you're inspired to read some classic novels. Classics are a good thing to read. They offer insights that you probably aren't going to get in your typical YA novel. They are full of information and ideas that will last forever, so you should read them. That's all I'm saying, but just read them. Like, they actually are really good. Like, there's a reason they're classics, and they may be fat as fuck. They may be so fat that you want to die, but they're worth being that fat. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how many pages this is? And how much I'm going to die. Like, if I ever finish these, pray for me, because I'll be dead. Like, oh. And that's not even including The Hunchback. So, I hope I read these one day. I know I am going to read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I'm going to read at least one of these. But it's just a question of which one. I want to read all of them, but they're just so fat. They're really intimidating. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was kind of a mess. Yeah. Books. They're always a good idea. Like if you like books, comment if you've read a book in your life, and subscribe if you've seen a book on a bookshelf. Bye. Please kill me now.